Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. It's episode 112, which means if you're keeping count, it's the 12th episode since the podcast went from being a 2-hour show to a 30-minute show. And I hope you're liking the new format. And I've not gotten really a lot of feedback about whether or not people are liking the new format. So if you have any comments about the new format, you like it, you hate it, you think I should do something different, let me know. Send your comments to Daryl at fppradio.com. That's Daryl, D-A-R-R-Y-L, at fppradio.com. And, of course, if you have questions, you can send those to AMA at fppradio.com. I do an Ask Me Anything every Wednesday, Monday, and Friday. Generally, I cover newsy sorts of things. And today I've got something that is actually fairly interesting. It involves a chimpanzee by the name of Timmy. And apparently, Timmy went to court recently seeking human rights. Well, obviously, Timmy didn't file the paperwork, and I don't think Timmy actually took the stand. Or, I'm sorry, it's Tommy. Tommy is the name of the chimp, not Timmy. But in either case, I don't think Tommy actually took the stand. Instead, I think the lawyer for Tommy took the stand. The article here comes from UPI, which is United Press International. A New York appeals court denied a chimpanzee's claim to the full rights of human beings on Thursday, finding that the primate has no social duties. Now, obviously, looking at this do chimpanzees or monkeys or gorillas have human rights? It seems fairly obvious, no, they don't have human rights. But this brings up another question of, do animals have any rights? And if so, what rights should those be? The article continues. It says, the court, in a unanimous decision, ruled against the 26-year-old chimp named Tommy and his lawyer, Stephen Weiss, the president of the Non-Human Rights Society. Weiss challenged the right of Tommy's owners to keep him in a cage in Gloversville, New York. Chimpanzees, the article says, are the closest surviving relatives of Homo sapiens, descended from a common ancestor 4 to 6 million years ago. They have been observed in the wild using tools, and some members of the species in captivity have learned to communicate through sign language or by manipulating symbols. But the 5 justices of the appeals court in Albany found that they are not fully human. Now, obviously, you are probably thinking the same thing I am thinking. It's obvious that chimpanzees aren't human, therefore they don't have human rights. But the reasons that the judge gave, or rather the reasons that one of the judges gave, is a little mind-boggling. Presiding Justice Karen Peters wrote in a short opinion, quote, needless to say, unlike human beings, chimpanzees cannot bear any legal duties, submit to social responsibilities, or be held legally accountable for their actions. In our view, in our view, she writes, it is this incapability to bear any legal responsibilities and societal duties that renders it inappropriate to confer upon chimpanzees the legal rights, such as the fundamental right to liberty protected by the writ of habeas corpus, that have been afforded to human beings. So let me sort of break down what the judge wrote here, because she's writing, in very legalese, she is saying that chimpanzees are not human, so therefore they should not have human rights. And I agree, chimpanzees are not humans. But I don't necessarily agree with her reasoning for why they're not human. She says they're not human because they can't bear any legal duties, submit to societal responsibilities, or be held legally accountable for their actions. I.e., they can't pay taxes. They can't do other things that make people in her eyes. And what makes people in her eyes is being able to do what they're told, pay their taxes, and basically obey the authorities, what she calls societal responsibilities and legal duties. She's meaning paying taxes and being a quote-unquote good citizen. You might recall it was a couple of weeks ago on episode 104 where I talked about that sheet that was sent home with the elementary school students on what is a good citizen. And basically what they were teaching children is that a good citizen does what they're told. And by does what they're told, they mean does what they're told by someone with some sort of quote-unquote authority. They listen to police officers, they listen to politicians, and they do what they're told. Chimpanzees, according to this judge, cannot bear legal duties, meaning that there's no way to basically make them do as they're told, pay their taxes, and be a good little slave. Chimps can't do that, so therefore, according to Justice Karen Peters, chimps aren't human. Now, she does not answer the question of whether a chimpanzee can be someone's pet, because that's not the question that was brought before her. The article here continues. It says, an appeals court in Rochester, New York, heard arguments this week in another action brought by Weiss on behalf of a chimpanzee in Niagara Falls. Weiss, in his complaint, charged that Patrick and Diana Lavery of Gloversville were effectively keeping Tommy in solitary confinement under conditions the primate would never have consented to. He did not charge that the couples violated any animal welfare laws, instead arguing that chimpanzees are so close to humans that they should be treated as legal persons. So he brought up an argument that is very interesting, that not that Tommy the chimp should be recognized as a human being, but that Tommy the chimp should be recognized as a legal person. Now, what's the difference between a human being and a legal person? Well, basically, the difference is government recognition, because corporations are legal persons. A legal person can enter into a contract. Your dog cannot enter into a contract. You, as the owner, can enter into a contract on behalf of your dog, but your dog itself cannot enter into a contract because your dog is not a legal person. The man here wanted basically Tommy to be recognized as a legal person.
Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. I trust Coinbase. You should too. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. Hi, I'm Daryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of Porkfest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Now, I'm not going to talk about Tommy the Chimp anymore today, unless, I might talk about him in the future if something interesting comes up. But I've got some other interesting news. This out of Virginia, and it involves a bit of a social experiment, a very rare social experiment that doesn't happen very often. And it involves the claim that libertarians are basically Republicans. Well, there's a social experiment that kind of might maybe dispel that. And I'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about some ways that you can help FPP Radio, Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, the other podcast that I do, as well as the monthly newspaper that I put out, and that is by shopping online. Now, how does shopping online help me? Well, very good question. If you go to shop.fppradio.com before going to Amazon or any of the other affiliates that I have, then you will wind up helping me out, because Amazon, you don't pay any more when you shop at Amazon or Express Coin or Amagi Metals or Virgin Mobile or the other places that I have affiliates. But what you do is you wind up letting them know that I sent you, and then they send me a little something in return. So begin your shopping experience at shop.fppradio.com. You actually don't have to go anywhere from that page to shop at Amazon, because there's a shopping iframe built into the page. Again, shop.fppradio.com. So what is this social experiment in Virginia that I mentioned? Well, you know the claim that libertarians are basically Republicans. That's at least what a lot of Republicans want you to believe, and that's what some of the mainstream media will tell you, is that libertarians are Republicans, they just happen to like pot. But they never tell you, libertarians are Democrats that want you to keep your own money. They never tell you that. But there was a very strange election in Virginia this year. I've got the article here from Ballot Access News, and Richard Winger over there at Ballot Access News does a tremendous job of finding these stories, putting them all in one place. So the story here says Virginia held 2 elections for U.S. House 7th District on November 4th. One was for the regular 2-year term, and the other was for the shorter term running from November to early January. So basically it was to finish out the term that was left vacant when Eric Cantor resigned earlier this year. The Democratic and Republican nominees for both of the elections were the same. But the regular election had a Libertarian candidate on the ballot, whereas the special election only had the Republican and the Democrat. The vote in the regular election was Republican Dave Bratt with 148,026 votes, Democrat John K. Trammell, 89,914 votes, and Libertarian James A. Carr with 5,086. There were 325 miscellaneous write-in votes. The vote in the special election that took place at the exact same time That's why they're calling this a weird social experiment that doesn't really happen that often, because it's very rare when you are able to actually see how people would vote absent the third candidate. So the special election that took place on the same ballot at the same time as the regular election had the Republican Dave Bratt, Democrat John K. Trammell. The special election, Bratt received 148,841 votes. Trammell received 91,236. Miscellaneous write-ins, 1,236. Because the two major party nominees were the same individuals in both races, this juxtaposition, Winger writes, of the two elections gives evidence of how most voters who vote Libertarian, at least in this part of Virginia, would vote if no Libertarian were on the ballot. It appears that approximately 26% of the Libertarians' votes voted Democrat in the special election, which did not list the Libertarian. 16% of the people that voted for the Libertarian for the full term voted Republican in the special election, absent the Libertarian, and the other 58% of the Libertarians' voters either cast a write-in vote or chose not to vote in the special election, which means that, it pretty much dispels the myth that Libertarians pull all of their votes for Republicans, or even a majority of their votes from Republicans. This shows 58% of Libertarians either would not have voted or would have cast a write-in vote. 26% would have voted Democrat, and the other 16% would have voted Republican. So this hopefully should dispel the myths of Libertarians taking votes away from Republicans being a spoiler, but there are some people that don't necessarily agree. But there's a very fascinating a comment, rather, on the thread from Ballot Access News, and I'm going to read part of this. It's from Daniel Weiner, who I forget his position within the Libertarian Party, but he is certainly involved within the LP. He says, now we have hard evidence and at least one major test case that the majority of voters who prefer Libertarian candidates would refuse to hold their noses and vote for the Republican or the Democrat in the absence of the Libertarian. Those are voters the major party candidates never had anyway. And I'm not reading his full comment. I'm jumping down a little bit. And what he had mentioned earlier in his comment was the fact that candidates don't own the votes. They always say, well, they're taking votes away from this candidate. Well, no, they're not taking a vote away from that candidate because that candidate never would have had their vote. When I cast a write-in vote for Gardner Goldsmith in the Senate election in New Hampshire, I was not removing a vote from Scott Brown or Jeanne Shaheen because I would not vote for either one of those people ever. So neither of those candidates ever had my vote. So to claim that me casting a write-in vote took a vote away from somebody is an absolute lie. However, he continues, and I'll read just a little bit more of Weiner's comments in the next segment, but I also want to tell you about the guy that might possibly maybe be replacing Chuck Hagel as Secretary of Defense. There's more when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So just a little bit more here from Daniel Weiner with his thoughts on what happened in Virginia in this experiment. And that's really what it is. It's a social experiment, and it's done in a way to where there's no way to actually fabricate these results. Whereas if you stopped people in a shopping mall and gave them ballots and asked them, how would you vote if the election were today? And these were the candidates, and they fill it out, and then, okay, so how would you vote if these were the candidates? It doesn't really show actually how they would vote. Now, it gives you some good indicators, but you never really know exactly if those results are accurate. Here we know these results are accurate because it was the election day and it was how people voted. So Weiner continues here. He says, again, those are the voters the major party candidates never had anyway, that being the 58% that did not vote for either of the major party candidates, having either cast a write-in ballot in the special election or just chose not to vote in the special election that happened the same day with the same major party candidates, just absent the Libertarian. Of the remaining LP voters, the Democrats would benefit as the lesser evil slightly more than the Republican. So the long-held stereotype that Libertarians are siphoning off Republican votes and costing Republicans close elections is not the case, and in fact could be just the opposite. The actual impact one way or the other will probably depend on the location and specifics of each race, the natures of the major party candidates, the campaign themes, which the LP candidate emphasizes, and other random factors. It is also noteworthy that the net difference between the Democrat and Republican second choices of Libertarian voters was only about 10% of the total Libertarian vote. If that is representative, it further undercuts the whining by the loser in a close race where the Libertarian candidate's vote somewhat exceeds the victory margin by the Democrat or Republican. The LP candidate's vote total would have to be about 10 times the victory margin for a 10% net difference to alter the outcome. This, he writes, should also help counter the wasted vote syndrome and the lesser of two evils syndrome. So maybe it's something for people to think about, especially people that still do the voting thing. And, of course, I do, but I've never bought into the wasted vote theory. But when I say that, hopefully it gives people something to think about, I mean the people that buy into the wasted vote theory, like here's hard proof that, the wasted vote theory is BS and that the lesser of two evil thing, maybe some of the people that voted for the Republican were voting for the lesser evil. Maybe some of the people voting Democrat were voting for the lesser evil. But it shows that voting for the third party, if that's who you truly wanted, then you're not, throwing the race one way or the other, because it's such a small margin of people that would have voted for the major party candidate anyway, as to where it doesn't really affect the race. And one could argue that just voting in general, it's such a small possibility that you will, wind up being the tie-breaking vote, if you will, that your vote will be the one that matters. So, that there are still going to be the people, that will look at this and say, well, this just proves that voting is useless and it's a waste of your time. And, can't really argue with them. However, it's the system that we have, and I will use it to express my dissent. So, let's talk about the guy that might maybe possibly be replacing Chuck Hagel as Secretary of Defense. The article here from antiwar.com, and a big thank you to Angela Keaton for pointing this out to me, because somehow I totally missed this article. Even though antiwar.com is in my RSS feed, sometimes there's so many things that I'll just click everything as read and not really pay attention. The article, written by Jason Dietz, says, with most of the Obama administration's first and second and third choices for defense secretary after sacking Chuck Hagel, making it abundantly clear that they don't want the job, the administration seems to be scraping around in the bottom of the barrel and has come up with former Deputy Defense Secretary Ashton Carter. Dietz writes, a longtime academic derided as the next coming of Paul Wolfowitz, Carter oversaw several enormously expansive weapons development projects, including the F-35. Throughout the time in office, Carter's public comments mostly centered on condemning potential military budget cuts. Carter had been seen as a potential candidate when Hagel was selected and left office shortly thereafter, leading many to believe his role in government was over. It was only after Michel Flournoy, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and several others spurned the job that the administration has come back to Carter's name as a Hagel replacement. On the policy side of things, Carter is just a run-of-the-mill hawk who in 2006 pushed for a Bush administration attack on North Korea over its nuclear program and pushed for a redefinition of the war on terror into a war on WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction. Carter argued that the Iraq War itself, started over WMDs, was justified at the time, but said North Korea and Iran were both far graver threats that needed to be confronted, urging the U.S. to center its policy on a mixture of coercion and diplomacy. Now, I will just say that, that's a bad idea, trying to mix coercion and diplomacy. Bad idea. Mainly because if you're coercing people into doing things, then it doesn't really matter how nice you are, you're still being an effing bully. And I don't think that the U.S. military should be an effing bully, because they do enough of that. That's why people don't like the United States of America, because our military is acting like a big giant bully. The article continues. It says Carter was also typical of the anti-Iran hawks in arguing that deterrence doesn't work against Iran because of its extreme ideology, and claiming that even a civilian Iranian nuclear program would threaten the entire region, and repeatedly insisted that military action was a vital part of a comprehensive strategy against Iran. What Carter's selection will mean for the focus on the war against the Islamic State remains to be seen, but with the Islamic State not a significant WMD threat beyond its makeshift chemical weapons, he may seek to shift focus toward other conflicts. And it would not surprise me if he wants to wind up bombing Iran, because that seems to be something that a lot of people want to do. Oh, Iran's got nuclear stuff. Yeah, and Iran's nuclear stuff is not weapons grade. They're not a threat. Iran's never tried to kill me. Nobody from Iran has ever tried to kill me. Don't go kill people in Iran in my name. Don't do it. It's not safe. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.